Well, welcome everyone to another workshop here at the Test Camp. Thanks to our host. This is an elementary education reading and language arts workshop here today. Let's discuss how learning and practicing test skills will empower your test confidence. Now, those of you joining us live online, you're welcome to contribute your comments anytime. I wish you could be here with us, but we'll include as many of your comments as possible during the discussion periods here today. And if you're joining us directly through the Test Camp YouTube channel, that's on demand. Of course, you have an advantage because you can pause and restart or replay that video anytime. So again, this workshop is one of in our series of the elementary education tests. I guess it's the first one there, isn't it? All right, so we're going to discuss the different types of tests used in different states and how language arts and reading is tested. And feel free to ask any questions. I see we already have one back here, so feel free to ask any questions during the workshop, and I'll repeat them for those who are listening to the recording. Yes, go ahead, right back here. Right, so you're looking at 4 individual tests, and this workshop is going to be just for reading and language arts. Is that your question, right? But we are going to have all 4. Yes, we will have one for each one. And your test also is, well, it depends. That's what we're going to get into. It depends on where you're at in the state. So let's look at that for just a minute. First, let me just tell you a little introduction about who we are, if you don't already know. Our motto is prepare, then practice, then perform. Everyone who has successfully completed the training has passed their test, and that's because test taking is a skill, and that skill requires practice. And this is the place where people come to learn and practice those test skills. So to prepare here at the Test Camp means to understand yourself. It means an honest assessment of how well you know the test content, but also how well you know your testing skills. Guaranteed to pass. And we start by learning the blueprint. And the blueprint tells you everything you need to know about a test. Some of you have been through these workshops that I have posted up here, so you know that. You've been through this before, so you know how it works. Okay, this can also be a good first step to creating what we call my study plan, and that's a schedule that includes reviewing and studying the test content. All right, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on too, but let's learn about this blueprint. So back to your question, here's an overview of an elementary education test that's used in many states. Okay, so maybe, even though you're here today, maybe this isn't the one you're using. Do you know? All right, well anyway, we can see here that this is a single test that has combined 4 subject areas. One test, all right? And the percentage of questions we put up here on the right-hand side of this table, all right? So that you would know that if you're taking this test, reading and language arts then is a majority of the test. That's probably where you'd want to review and study, right? So this single combined test has 140 questions, and you have 150 minutes. So just over 1 minute allotted for each question. And you'd probably want to save a little bit of time for those math questions. They seem to be a little bit more challenging. So here's an overview of a different elementary test. This is also used in many states. This includes questions about teaching and has a subtest for each subject area. All right, so do you get that? So there would be a teaching section in language arts and teaching in math and that sort of thing. Okay. In this case, language arts and reading, or I guess reading and language arts there it would say, that has 63 multiple choice questions and 90 minutes, so about a minute and a half on this test, all right, per question. And here's another test that's used by some states. So you'll want to know which elementary education test is required for your state. Are you required to take a single combined test, or can you expect a test with subtests on it, which have teaching questions included? All right, did that help you out there? All right, great. Well, in either case, the first step is to prepare by identifying the types of reading and language arts questions you can expect to encounter on your test. Now, I'm sometimes saying language arts and reading because it depends on, again, on the state. Some of them say reading and language arts and some the other way around. Now, we're not going to look at the tests in terms of the format because we know that they're all formatted the same. Up here's what we're looking for, the competencies on which test questions are built. Okay, so I'm going to call them reading education tests. They're generally built on 6 different competencies, and that's what we're here to do today. We provide quizzes over at the training center for each competency. All right, and that way you can determine which area you might need to review or study. So, what are the competencies that a professional teacher needs to be well-rounded in any subject area? All right, how many of the 6 do you think you could identify? In a few moments, we're going to do this. All right, see if you can do it with the people there at your table. You're going to do it, but I'm going to help you get you started first. The first one is reading. That kind of makes sense, right? Reading and language arts. But what we're talking about here is the stages of reading development. So this is required of all professionals in every subject, every grade level. Now, why do you think that's important? What would you guess? Over here, what are you thinking about that? You talking about it? I'll repeat the answer for those listening to the video. Yes, every teacher assigns reading assignments, right? So the professional teacher is expected to choose assignments that are appropriate for their grade level, yeah, and their students. Okay, so it's your turn to identify the other competencies. See if you can get all 6 there, and we'll get back as one big large group in a couple minutes, and we're going to compare our lists. Okay, so those of you joining us today online, share your thoughts. We're going to include them in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand by the Test Camp YouTube channel, this might be a good time to pause the recording and see if you can identify the competencies. I'll give you a hint there. Number 2 is literature. And that doesn't really mean literature, it means literary devices. But that's where we're going to start when you come back and restart the video. Okay, all right, so we are back. Everyone back up here? All right, let's start comparing our list. The second competency, you might have seen it flashed up there, is literature, but this does not mean literature like what you're reading. This means literary devices. Remember, this is reading and language arts. So did any group talk about literary devices here? Oh, only one group. Okay. Well, let's see if you discussed the third competency on the list, which is writing. Okay, most of you had that. Well, as you know, probably, students are progressing through the stages of writing concurrently with reading, right? So any groups discuss this, the competency writing? Most of you had this, okay. The fourth competency then is communication. The professional teacher is able to communicate. This is straight from the test information guides here. The teacher is able to communicate in a way that's understood by the students. So, giving directions, modeling good listening, that sort of thing. Okay, your group did discuss this, communication. Any other groups discuss this? Okay, so we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, and of course over at the training center there's a lot more detail gets into this. This is just an overview here today. The fifth competency is teaching strategies. Whoops, it's research, excuse me. You said teaching strategies. No, we're going to do teaching is actually going to be number 6. But research, that's like citations, plagiarism, you know, all that kind of business. So next would be then teaching. That's the 6th competency. And of course, these can be in any order, but this is just the way we do it, and this is the way we set it up for the quizzes for you too. All right, so how well did your group do to match the list? How many got at least 4 of these? Everybody 5? Okay, so quite a few. And did any group get all 6? Okay, you just named it a little bit differently, right? So this is kind of the blueprint then, or this just kind of shows you the competencies that the test writers use to make their questions. All right, so let's talk about these individually, starting up there at the top with reading. Here's a sample question. Okay, and we don't start up here. We always start down here at the answer set first. All right, take a minute and look through these first here. All right, then you go up to the top to the stem. All right, so why is it we always start with the answer set first? Does anybody know? You've been to the other workshops. Yeah, it keeps you focused, doesn't it? It focuses you in on what the question might be, and now we know also the competency, right? Is this going to be a reading question? Sure, reading and language, a reading question, not reading language arts. Sure it is. So you see how that works. All right, so we've invested some time here today on that first competency, which was reading. Now we're moving on to literature. And according to the test information guides, the skills you need to demonstrate about literature include knowledge of genres and devices. So what would you say are genres? If you could say it in just one word over here, what would you call it? Genres are, yes, categories. There you go. Categories like fiction, fantasy, poetry. All right, those are all genres. And then devices, then what are those? Literary, okay, tools, right? Tools, devices, techniques, that sort of thing. This is how the author adds texture, energy, excitement to their stories. So again, back at your tables, this is pretty important here. Take a couple minutes and see if you can name more of the types of devices that are used by authors. All right, and then we'll come back and compare our list in just a couple minutes. Hey, thanks again to those of you who are joining us today live online for sharing your thoughts. We're going to continue to put them up here on the discussion boards and include them in our discussion here today. And if you're joining us on demand, well, this might be a good time to pause that recording and test your knowledge of literary devices, or go do a quick search on that. We'll be here when you restart the video. Other literary devices up here. Let's do a few of these. This group over here, you said personification. Okay. How about this group over here? What's one that you think they might not have? Onomatopoeia. That's right. Zoom. Buzz. There you go. Euphemism. Okay, there's another one. Like not the sharpest tool in the shed. That sort of thing. Okay. Well, let's look at a couple sample questions here. We talked about the other literary devices. Let's try that. Genres, right? That's a typical question you can expect. Let's look at another example. Remember to start at the answer set down there. Metaphor, personification. Oh, we know these are literary devices. All right, so we see how that works. On to the third competency, which we know is writing. And this competency can be thought about in two main areas. The test information guides provide guidance about what each skill entails, both for the developmental stages of writing and for the writing process. So let's take a look at a couple sample questions. All right, you notice the answer set there. Here's another sample question. Yeah, you might see this format used when they're talking about writing. Okay, let's move on to the next reading education competency for reading and language arts, and that's communication. Three main skill sets define this competency. All right, so again, at your tables, talk this over a little bit. When they say penmanship, how would you test that? What do you think test questions might look like? And listening and speaking. Really? You were the test writer, so now you have to write a test question to make sure the teachers understand listening and speaking. Can you do that? And maybe some of you will try ethics. All right, so we're going to take a few minutes on this one. See if you can figure out what they're talking about here, and could you write a test question based on one of these? And we'll come back as a group and we'll share those with each other. Thanks. All right, again, those of you joining us today live online, share your thoughts, post them up here, and we'll include them in our discussion. And if you're joining us on demand, this might be a really good time to go ahead and pause the recording and make a list. We'll go ahead and have the discussion here, but we'll have you rejoin us when you restart the video. Okay, that was a really good discussion. We had a lot of good test writers here, right? It's not as easy to write a test question as you might think. But we talked about the skills for each one. And some of you had legibility, right, for penmanship. You could test the student's spacing. Okay. You knew that because you said you had elementary education courses. Well, good. Very good. All right. How about listening and speaking? issues related to eye contact, the gestures that the teacher makes. Remember we said giving directions. Okay, and then finally ethics. Teaching your students about what it means to be ethical in reading and language arts. So let's look at a couple sample questions for this category, communication. All right, definitely a communications question. Here's another example. Teacher-student communication. Okay. And how about this one? Which of the communication skills is represented here? There you go, ethics. All right, so we're catching on here, right? Is this being helpful? Good. All right, so the fifth competency used to create reading and language arts test is research. The skills related to this competency include determining types of sources, conducting searches, and the proper use of citations. So here's a sample question, starting down there at the bottom. A scholarly article, an opinion poll, a commentary, a recent article. All right, then you look up top for keywords. What's the keywords or phrase here? How about over here at this table? What do you got? Primary source. There you go. All right, here's another sample question. Website, conference paper, journal, book. Type of resource, right? Let's try to get rid of a couple of these answers here. What would you eliminate? All right, we decided before we made this we were going to eliminate website. That's definitely not a citation for a website. What else? Conference paper. We agree. So that leaves either journal or book. See how that works? Right, you'll practice that over in the testing area. The last competency, the sixth one we had on our list, was teaching. And again, there's three main skills related to this competency. Learning environment, teaching strategies, and differentiated assessment. So again, check out these test information guides, or you can join us in the professional education tests, and then that's where you can find out a little bit more about the teaching competencies. And now here's another sample question. All right, so can you tell from the answer set that this question is going to be about teaching, even before you looked up at the STEM? I think we have another one of these here. Wow, this is an example of a question you would not attempt to answer on the first time through the test. Yeah, you know this is a test skill we practice. I think there's one more. Let's see. Yes, one more. Again, too long to answer on the first pass, but I'll let you take a look. What's the skill they're testing you on here? Looks like assessment, right? So that is an overview of the 6 competencies the test writers are using to create these reading and language arts tests. Which area would you consider to be your strongest? How about your weakest? All right, well, we'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. What is the passing score required for standardized tests like this? What do you are correct. There you go. Each state is different. So that's why the passing score here at the test camp is 80%. This is a good target score and one that's going to ensure that you pass your test. The state certification pass rates are generally lower, sometimes much lower, in the 60s. But mid-70s, you can expect to get a scale score that's going to get you a pass. Let's look back at those tests like we did when we started just a little bit ago. 140 questions on this test, so about 100 would get you a pass for the entire combined test. All right, so during your training, you're going to learn how to practice the test skills that'll get you through those on your first attempt. On this language and arts reading subtest, you're required to probably get, what would you think, about 45, maybe 50 at the most. But that's good to know because you're not supposed to get them all correct. This is not an A-B test. It's a pass-fail, exactly. And finally, on this test, do you remember this one? 80 questions, So probably about 60 or so, right? That would be 75%. All right, so we asked about your strongest and weakest areas on the competencies. Let's talk about that for a moment in our last discussion break here. If you were taking the quizzes today or a practice test, which would you consider your strongest area now that you had a little preview of these? And do you have one that you think is maybe more challenging? All right, so talk that over at your tables. Maybe talk about how you actually plan to study for this, review and study some of these, and then we'll come back and talk as an entire group in just a few minutes. All right, thanks again for those who joined us live online here today. We've been using your thoughts and ideas, of course, during the discussions. And if you're watching this pre-recorded workshop, good time to do again a little bit of self-reflection. Which would you choose and how do you prepare for a standardized test? Come back and join us anytime. Restart that video. Let's get started. All right, some very interesting discussions about strategies back there, right? And how to review and study for a standardized test. We can summarize by saying, like we do in most of the workshops, there's no right way for everyone, but that we do need to review and study for some of these, that's for sure. That's how we get prepared. And speaking of how to prepare for a test, you've already done that. You joined this workshop, so congratulations on investing some time in this. I hope it's been helpful for you to hear today. All right, well, thank you for that. Another way to prepare is to select the tools or the resources that you might need. So you're going to see over in the training center this sign along the pathways during your test skills training. Does anybody know what this sign means over here? Yeah, go ahead over here in the back. Yes, they are messages. They're messages that are left, well, that we post for the people who've gone before you. And in this case, the message is avoid spending your time and your money on expensive resources. You just don't need them for this test. Commercial webinars are a good example. Avoid paying for free test information. Avoid paying for strategies that you can't practice. That's all free, just like what we did here for you today. Expensive tutors and tutoring companies, they might be an option for more challenging tests, but certainly not for this one. It only goes up through middle grades curriculum. Overpriced study guides also out there are sold for a profit. We've heard people paying $30, $40, $50 or more. Oh, you did? Sorry about that. All right, well, many study guides are available. Oh boy, I hate to even say it. They're either free or inexpensive. I'll show you just a moment. More effective and inexpensive resources that they're recommending is textbooks. All the folks have gone before you. They say they go out and find the textbooks up through middle grades. And that's a nice inexpensive way. Now you know the competencies. You know how to review and study the test content. So over at the training site, you're going to find an area called My Resources. Let you look at that here for a moment. That's where the most popular and up-to-date resources are listed for you. Those study companions are all free. That tells you everything you need to know about the test. Those are the blueprints. And the study guides you can see there, you can get a used one through Amazon for $5 or less. All right, so instead of investing time and money on resources, they're suggesting invest time in yourself. Practice your test skills. Expect to gain confidence. Expect to gain personal independence and skills that you can share with your students. So your pass already provides admission to these training areas. Up there at the top is My Test. This is the activity that enables to check your understanding of the test blueprint, everything we've talked about here today. You can also take a pre-test there before you start the training. This is the test camp problem solving system. It's the first step to finding the correct answer. We know that up there is to identify the type of question by the competency. We've been doing that a little bit of that here today, haven't we? Quizzes and tests provide an opportunity to practice your test skills while assessing your test content knowledge. And the quizzes are all based on the competencies. Yes, right over here. I'll repeat it for the people listening to the video. Yes, you have multiple attempts on each one of the quizzes, and the answers change and the questions change on each attempt. Good question. There's even a combined quiz down there for you that kind of gets you ready for the practice tests. Several of those, and those are going to have features like those you can expect on the on test day, like the timer, the mark and save button, that sort of thing. And you can complete the post-test there. That can earn you points towards a professional test certificate that guarantees your success. And then you can expect to perform with confidence. And of course, that comes from the knowledge and skills earned during the training. So let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for this here today. Hope it was helpful for you. There's no better time than now to empower your test confidence.